Good evening. I'm Ali Velshi here in New York.
And I'm Stephanie Rule, and welcome to an MS Now special report revealed inside the Epstein files. Tonight, we're going to try and make sense of the millions of Epstein documents that were released by Donald Trump's Justice Department. That includes over 3 million separate documents just released on January 30th. The Justice Department had to do this because of the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
Now, the Epstein Files Transparency Act is a law that was passed by Congress and signed in November by Donald Trump. MS Now has also obtained a letter that was sent by Trump's Justice Department to members of Congress confirming that they will, in fact, be allowed to view the Epstein files without redactions.
Big news.
That's a very big deal, and that's starting on Monday. The files are going to be available to lawmakers in a reading room at the DOJ headquarters, but it comes with some strings attached.
Absolute reading room.
Yeah.
These files are not getting out. The letter sent by Assistant Attorney General Patrick Davis states the following. No outside electronic devices will be allowed in the reading room. Members may take notes. Members must abide by all applicable legal restrictions regarding the dissemination of any information reviewed. We are confident that this review will further demonstrate the department's good faith work to appropriately process an enormous volume of documents in a very short time. Let me just say, it wasn't that short a time.
No,
right? They have been working on this.
They've known this was coming for a while. It was November when the bill was signed, so they had at least that much time. But they knew this was coming because there was so much pressure building. That whole thing about good faith. That's the claim that the department's good faith work. That's the claim that's likely to raise plenty of eyebrows for the point you just made. Some of Donald Trump's most ardent supporters, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, have turned on him precisely because there's no evidence that the Trump administration has actually been acting in good faith at all. In fact, many of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse, including Haley Robson, with whom we're going to speak in just a few moments, they've been exceedingly critical of how the administration has actually handled this.
In fact, members of the House Oversight Committee say they believe the Justice Department is still holding on to half of the files. I'm going to say it again, half.
Yep.
Many of Epstein's survivors also claim that he trafficked girls and women, not just for himself, but for a host of other men. And we still do not have evidence to prove or disprove those very allegations.
All right, let's begin our conversation tonight with MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. Lisa, thank you, first of all, for being with us tonight, because we're trying to make sense of all this. It's so much information that we're trying to put it all together. So what stands out to you about what we know so far and maybe more importantly, what we don't?
Well, let's talk about what stands out to me about what we know so far, because I think this last week represented the media sort of searching for salacious, low-hanging fruit. We know a lot more about who's making $15,000 contributions to private schools in New York, for example, than we did before. But I'm not sure that further advances the ball of finding out who is actually responsible and complicit in the ring of sex trafficking that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell perpetrated for quite some time, and increasingly with more and more brazenness as it went on. One of the things that I think stands out to me is that when you dump 3 million pages, as the Department of Justice has,
Filled with redactions,
but also not filled with redactions,
right, both.
It becomes impossible for the public to differentiate between an anonymous tip called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center on one hand, and someone whose story has been vetted and re-vetted and gone over multiple times with the FBI and the Department of Justice. So there is a huge range of credibility with respect to things that people have alleged about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And putting them all together, lumping them all in one big production, makes it impossible for many people to separate the wheat from the chaff. And in the end, really undermines the stories of those people that have held up over time. By making them all seem like they are equal, it both elevates the anonymous tip that doesn't pan out and depresses the testimony, for example, of people who spent a lot of time with DOJ and the FBI and testified at Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. It sort of makes them all equivalent and makes it hard for people to separate the two.
Donald Trump, while he does not have any direct email with Jeffrey Epstein, which shouldn't be a surprise, Donald Trump doesn't use email. He's mentioned tens of thousands of times. Is there any reason to believe that he truly knew what Jeffrey Epstein was up to?
I think Donald Trump has told us himself, I don't need the Epstein files to know some of that stuff. When he has made some of his comments about, for example, why he stopped associating with Jeffrey Epstein, he made a comment at the White House that he stopped talking to Jeffrey Epstein because Jeffrey Epstein was a creep. He kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, he said.
But that wasn't even true. That yes, it was true he was a creep, but the timeline he's used over the years with when he threw him out of Mar-a-Lago doesn't line up when you read the documents.
It doesn't.
Yes.
But even taking him on good faith, it seems as if Donald Trump was perturbed that Jeffrey Epstein poached Virginia Giuffre, who is one of the most prominent accusers, from her job at Mar-a-Lago, where she was working a summer job in the spa. She was approached by Ghislaine Maxwell sitting outside reading a book about how to become a professional masseuse. And that's how she got entangled in Jeffrey Epstein's web. When Donald Trump has commented about that, he appears to be talking about Virginia, saying that Jeffrey Epstein poached one of his employees. If he had understood that Jeffrey Epstein poached a teenage employee and was allegedly running a finance business, why you don't ask yourself, what is a teenager doing working for this person in their finance business, but at their home? It seems to me that Donald Trump should have been asking himself questions a long time ago and in ways that don't even necessarily implicate these files.
Lisa, stick around for a minute because we want to now get to the crux of this matter with Haley Robson. Haley was 16 years old when she met Jeffrey Epstein. Before it became law, she spoke, along with many survivors of Epstein's crimes, in support of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Haley, thank you for being with us. We're sorry that you have to keep on doing this. You have to keep on not just telling us the story, which is important, but trying to just get something honest out of the Department of Justice. They've claimed this is over. We've got the files we're going to get, and there's no more prosecution to have. How does that make you feel?
I don't think the DOJ or this administration gets to call it quits. They're not in charge anymore. And I think that's part of the problem. They're not realizing it. The survivors are not going away. We are not going to sit back. We are going to keep fighting and keep moving forward. And we have some incredible attorneys and a lot of support. And we are going to keep the pressure on as much as we can.
Sloppy redactions expose the name of many survivors. Some women, in the first 2 days, there was nude photos of some survivors, that it wasn't for the New York Times alerting the DOJ. They would still be up there. What has that been like for you and some other survivors that I know you're in communication with?
To be clear, I'm flabbergasted at this whole chaotic situation. I mean, when you don't think it could get any worse and then you hold your breath and you're like, oh, it just got worse. You know, to be quite clear on my right, they've done a very sloppy job. It's been very unprofessional. It's been heartless. And this is what I would consider a war on not just the sexual assault survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, but this is a war on every survivor that has ever come forward. This is retribution. That's what it feels like for us.
Do you think that America will ever learn the names of these other men that you and other survivors have said trafficked them? Because there's a lot of other men whose names continue to be redacted.
So I would like to be honest in answering this, and I hope I don't offend the media. I absolutely do think it's possible. But I think for now, I think the goal or maybe a game plan should be, let's back off Trump for a little bit and stop making it about him, because there are other men that are equally involved in those files. So let's refocus the energy on some of the other men that are or have already been named. And let's open up an investigation and see if they are going to implicate other men in the process. Let's wait and see what the Clintons do. Maybe they'll be the ones to save the day. But I definitely think it's possible if we can refocus our energy on not just Trump, but let's move away from that and start focusing on the other individuals that have been implicated or named in the files.
Haley, I appreciate you saying that, because, and frankly, you should be as critical of the media as you'd like, because we can take that and we should take all of this criticism. Talk to me about the refocusing, because there is an issue here in that there are a lot of people who follow this because they wonder whether this is going to be the thing that brings Donald Trump down. And I understand why people believe that and care about that. But that's not even close to being the most important story here, right? The survivors are the most important story. The idea that there was sex trafficking of girls is the most important story. Tell me more about the refocus that you'd like to see, that you and the survivors would like to see from us.
And can I ask, is there anyone specific?
Anyone specific for
Besides
that I would
Donald
like to see
Trump.
implicate? All of them, specifically Acosta. I personally, for me, and I hate to speak for the survivors because we're all individual human beings.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's right.
But I think the refocus does need to happen. And I think as a group of survivors, we need to take a step back and we need to start pulling away from this administration and Trump and expecting them to help us and really, and I know Congress. I mean, I'm so thankful for Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, but I know that they have poured their heart and soul into this. And I know that if we can get with Congress and come up with a game plan of, hey, listen, we know that there have been people named. We know that there's probably a slim chance that there's going to be investigations, but let's get this taken care of. Let's refocus on the other people that are named in these files. So maybe those people will implicate other people along the way is usually how it happens. I obviously don't have a written strategic plan, but I'm open to listening to Congress. I'm open to working with the attorneys.
Pets are welcome.
This segment just went viral.
Pets are always, it is the best part about having guests join us from home. Pets are welcome.
I'm so sorry. But yes, I would love to speak to Congress. I would love to speak to my attorneys. I would love to speak with some of the other girls and see about coming up with a strategy to refocus and revamp on some of the other names that are in those files. I don't think strategy-wise for us to keep focusing on just Trump alone is going to get us anywhere because we're already being met with so much resistance from the DOJ and from other individuals. So I think it's time that we need to refocus and then come back to it.
Haley, thank you so much. And one day we're going to have you on to talk about things that are a little more celebratory than this. But I appreciate the work that you and the other survivors are doing to keep us and the whole country accountable.
Thank you.
Haley Robson.
Thank you.
Extraordinary. Extraordinary to hear Haley say they're not giving up. They're going to continue to fight, right? She wants to speak to Congress. She's got a legal team. Do you believe we are going to get these other 3 million pages, or the fact that we learned today that Congress is going to see this first 3 million unredacted? To me, that seems like a big positive.
It is a big positive, but it also comes with some drawbacks for the victims. A number of the survivors will say to me, I've never seen my own file. I don't know what's in there about me in a fully unredacted way. I would have liked to have the luxury of getting to review that by myself before everyone in the American public
Is that
saw
normal?
it. This whole process stuff is not normal, right? It's not normal for Congress to pass a law that requires the revelation of all sorts of investigative material that usually remains concealed by the FBI, by the Department of Justice, or under court order. So it's hard to say whether it's normal when this whole thing is abnormal. But I want to put the focus back on what she said. Will we ever know some of the names? I think we will, but I don't think they're going to come out of the names of out of the mouths of survivors, because there's too much disincentive for them to say it. If you think about some of the history here, many of the survivors, and one survivor in particular, was sued again and again by people who said that she defamed them by accusing them of complicity or participation in sexual assault.
Because there's a whole lot of rich and famous people in there, and
Correct.
the survivors are generally not.
Correct. And most of them are not just not rich and famous. Some of them are even what we call judgment proof, meaning they couldn't satisfy even a small fraction of a defamation judgment against them. And as a result, many of them are afraid to say the names that they hold in their heads and hearts every single day. So I think if we learn names, it will come out of the mouths of members of Congress on the basis of this investigation. And that's where your question about their being able to review some of these files fully unredacted is important, because what they were supposed to redact was victim identifying information. But there are a number of times where I have seen redactions in the files, other people here at MS Now have seen redactions that don't seem to be about protecting victims at all. And they want to get underneath them. And
Donald Trump's Justice Department is not considering bringing any additional criminal charges at all related to Jeffrey Epstein, despite having released millions of pages from the Epstein files. And that's according to Donald Trump's former personal defense attorney, who is now the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Todd Blanche.
There's a lot of correspondence. There's a lot of emails. There's a lot of photographs. There's a lot of horrible photographs that appear to be taken by Mr. Epstein or people around him. But that doesn't allow us necessarily to prosecute somebody. And that's what's important for the American people. And the victims want to be made whole. And so we want that. The Attorney General wants that more than anything. But that doesn't mean we can just create evidence or that we can just kind of come up with a case that isn't there.
Now, for months, Donald Trump and his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, slow-walked the full release of the Epstein files, and then they refused to meet the deadline completely that was written into law by Congress. But what if the Trump administration had instead supported a full investigation in the mold of, Jack Smith's investigation into Donald Trump? Would the Justice Department be in a place where it could actually hold more individuals accountable and maybe, almost as important, have the trust of the American people? Right. Because right now, given how this goat rodeo has gone, they don't. Nobody
knows what to believe. Mimi Rocco is joining us now. She's a former district attorney for Westchester County, New York, and a former assistant United States attorney for the Southern District of New York. Mimi, great to see you. Thank you for being with us. That wasn't all Todd Blanche has had to say about this. He's been wildly dismissive of this whole situation, putting aside the fact that he was Donald Trump's lawyer, and lawyers always have an obligation to anyone who was ever their client, and putting aside the fact that that was a weird thing that he did going and talking to Ghislaine Maxwell. So putting aside what you think about Todd Blanche's performance, this is pretty dismissive.
Very dismissive. And I think the most shocking thing that he said, the way that he put sort of another version of what he said to Dana Bash there, was on Fox News. He said, partying with Epstein, the American public needs to understand that partying with Epstein is not a crime. Okay, first of all, can we just say that it depends on your definition of partying? Right. Right? I mean, partying with minors who people are having sex with, yes, it is.
Okay, but Mimi, even if it's not a crime, right. Okay, we're a few weeks away from spring break. Right? And if there are some people on spring break who, engage in a wet T-shirt contest and post it on social media, they'll lose their job offers to be first-level analysts at a bank or a paralegal. But we're talking about some of the most powerful people in almost any industry out there, and their lewd and vile and disgusting behavior. And by the way, last time I checked, it's really easy for a really rich guy to meet women. But instead of going the traditional way, this is how they roll. And Todd Blanche's response is, it's not illegal?
Right. I mean, the point you're making, which is a really important one, is not everything needs to be a crime for us to be talking about it and giving it importance and for it to have some kind of consequence, right? I mean, we're seeing that with, Larry Sumner's had to step back from his role. Various people in other countries, in England, have lost their titles. There should be consequences above and beyond just crimes. Right. I mean, I'm a former prosecutor. We tend to talk about it. Todd Blanche, though, is even taking that point, which is, again, a really, really important one. But he is dismissing the possibility of crimes, again, in a very arrogant kind of, bro fist bump kind of way that I found offensive, and I'm sure the survivors did. But he also is dismissing it without saying he's missing a big step, the investigative step. He's just saying, well, we can't prosecute anybody. Well, there's no crimes.
Right. That doesn't mean there's nothing that you can do.
But exactly. Can we just look? I want to give an email as an example. Can we pull up? There's one email I want us to look at on the screen. Can we pull this up? Okay. The sender's name is redacted.
Yeah.
Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty. Help us understand. Obviously the name is redacted. Help us understand the mindset of the DOJ that they would think that person should have their name protected.
I cannot explain that. I mean, it is shocking to me that is redacted. And that is one of the most astounding things about these release of these files is the number of redactions of people who have what seem to be incriminating emails with Epstein. We don't know who they are. We don't know if it's the same person. We don't know if it's different people. There's a
But
whole...
that's right. Isn't that like, I don't want to accuse them of anything, but don't they need, when you read an email like that, you assume the worst. Isn't that why we need the DOJ to explain these redactions?
Right. There could be a perfectly good answer to that email, but we don't know it, and no one would trust it anyway at this point.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a perfectly innocent explanation, but the point of this act, of this law that they do not seem to be in compliance with, was actually to get out into the public domain people who are having discussions or emails, correspondence like this, and then for the DOJ to do follow-up investigation. Now, that doesn't mean that there is a crime to charge. I mean, on that point, Todd Blanche is like almost right. It means that you should do investigation, though, to determine it. And they have ruled out that important step of even doing.
So there was an investigation once, and it was very strange because when Todd Blanche went down to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell, lots of people said, why would the Deputy Attorney General be doing that? And even if you thought that was an appropriate thing for the Deputy Attorney General to have done, Todd Blanche himself probably wasn't the person to do it because he has ties to Donald Trump. There was somebody named Maureen Comey, who was at the Southern District of New York, with whom you've worked, who was investigating. A lot of people said, would have been interesting if Maureen Comey was in that room having that conversation. At least she would know what to ask. We're not even sure that Todd Blanche would have known what questions to ask of Ghislaine Maxwell.
100%. But they fired Maureen Comey just a few months before that.
Right.
Coincidence? I don't know. But they fired her for no good reason. They gave no reason. There was no good reason. I know Maureen very well. I supervised her. She is a legend in the office. She is a phenomenal and aggressive prosecutor. She will bring charges when there are charges to bring, and no one's going to really stop her if there's valid charges to bring. And the idea that they would be doing this kind of thing and talking to Ghislaine Maxwell without her at least input is malpractice, really.
Unbelievable situation. Thank you. Good to see you, Mimi. Thank you. We appreciate your time.
I have a feeling you'll be back on this subject.
Former federal prosecutor and Westchester County District Attorney Mimi Rocah.
When we come back, what the Epstein files released has exposed about Jeffrey Epstein's network of powerful men in tech, entertainment, the academic world, even British royalty. Almost none of them have faced accountability, and only a few have suffered professional punishment for their involvement with the country's most notorious child sex predator. When it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and those millions of pages of documents, we would not be here today without the women who stood up publicly to speak about what they experienced. Women like Hallie Robson, who we just spoke to. As we learn more about Epstein's years of abuse, it is very important to remember this is not about partisanship. This is about power and privilege and the way people in these circles can abuse that. And we are learning so much about the huge network Epstein had with powerful and important men in technology, real estate, finance, entertainment, medicine, the law, academia, American and international politics, and yes, even British royalty. Many of them who stayed in contact with Epstein even after he pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution from a minor in Florida back in 2008. The emails I am going to take you through happened after that. And these are just some of the people we learned about in this latest batch, because many of the documents, as we've said, have been heavily redacted, not to mention the DOJ is still holding on to millions more pages, which they say they're not releasing. Let's start with Elon Musk, the richest man in the world and one of Donald Trump's most powerful allies. Last year, Musk posted online, quote, Epstein tried to get me to go to his island and I refused. But here's the thing. The new documents show Musk tried to socialize with Epstein. In 2012, Musk asked Epstein, quote, what day/night will be the wildest party on your island? Now, over the weekend, Musk wrote, I had very little correspondence with Epstein and declined repeated invitations to go to his island. But Musk did not appear to be addressing the emails around the party that he specifically had with Epstein, or the emails in 2013 that appear to show Epstein's staff coordinating a visit for him to SpaceX, one of Musk's many companies. Then there's Steve Tisch. He's a film producer and co-owner of the NFL's New York Giants. Tisch is mentioned more than 400 times in the new files. Messages between Tisch and Epstein show Epstein offering to connect Tisch to several women. In one 2013 exchange about a woman, Tisch wrote, quote, pro or civilian? Yeah, that's what he wrote. In a statement from the Giants, Tisch said, in part, that he only had, quote, brief association where we engaged emails about adult women. He had to clarify adult women and other topics. He said that he never took Epstein up on, quote, any of his invitations and never went to his island. As we all know now, he was a terrible person and someone I deeply regret associating with, end quote. Dr. Peter Attia, that's a new name for a lot of people, the celebrity longevity influencer, appears in the files more than 1,700 times. Their friendship appears to have started back in 2014 and included visits to Epstein's home in Manhattan, as well as occasionally crude emails about women. In 2015, Attia wrote, "The biggest problem with becoming friends with you, the life you lead is so outrageous, and yet I cannot tell a soul." This week, Attia published a lengthy apology on social media, calling some of his emails embarrassing, tasteless, and indefensible. He also stressed that he was not involved in any criminal activity. Next, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the man formerly known as the United Kingdom's Prince Andrew. His name appears several hundred times in these new documents. That includes an invitation for Epstein to have dinner at Buckingham Palace in 2010, and photos that appear to show Andrew kneeling over an unidentified woman who's lying on the floor. He has long denied any wrongdoing. Then there's Brad Karp, the longtime chair of Paul Weiss, one of the biggest and most prestigious law firms in America. The documents show Epstein's team arranging for Karp's children to attend a Woody Allen film screening. In 2015, the day after a scheduled dinner, including Karp and Allen, Karp emailed Epstein to say, "You are an extraordinary host, and you're amazing." On Monday, the law firm issued a statement to the New York Times qualifying their interactions, saying Karp regrets those interactions. But by Wednesday, Karp abruptly stepped down as chairman of Paul Weiss. The Wall Street Journal reported some of the firm's top partners decided he could not continue in that role, though he does remain at the firm. Finally, Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Last year, Lutnick acknowledged that he used to be neighbors with Epstein. That happens, can't help that. And he chose to speak about when Epstein had he and his wife over for a tour of his home back in 2005. Watch this.
We left. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. Really? So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
He chose to say this a few months ago, that never after 2005. But here is what the New York Times said on Wednesday when the new Epstein files revealed about a trip Lutnick was planning with his wife and children. Quote, Lutnick planned a visit to Epstein's Island in 2012, long after 2005, though he previously said he severed ties with Epstein right around 2005. Reached by phone on Friday, Lutnick said he could not comment about the island visit because he had not seen the latest Epstein documents. Didn't say he didn't go, said he hadn't seen them. He said, I spent 0 time with him. He then hung up. The gathering was set for December 23rd, 2012. One day later, an assistant to Epstein forwarded Lutnick a message from Epstein, and it said, nice seeing you. On Monday, Fox News' Laura Ingraham asked Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about the men who partied with Epstein, men like Donald Trump, before he became president. And a reminder, Blanche used to be Trump's personal attorney. Watch this.
It is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. And so as horrible as it's not a crime to email with Mr. Epstein. And some of these men may have done horrible things. And if we have evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But it's also the kind of thing that the American people need to understand, that it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein.
He's correct. It's not illegal to party with Jeffrey Epstein, but what the files reveal is how extensive Epstein's contacts were. Even after he pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution from a child in 2008 and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. In the years after his conviction, that apparently did not matter for lots of powerful people until it did. And when their names resurfaced in connection with Epstein, some downplayed their contact with him, others denied the stories outright. But the documents revealed a different story, one of power and privilege, where some of the most powerful people acted as if they lived in a world different from the rest of us, one without consequences. But the more we learn, that might not be the case for much longer.
It's an incredible story. And when you realize that Epstein didn't really seem qualified for the financial advice and money management services that he was performing for people, it begs the question, why were all these people so all over Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted, after it was known what he did, after he was sentenced? It boggles the mind.
It sure does.
All right, coming up next, one investigative reporter who's doggedly followed the money and the moneyed men in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal joins us.